It hung there like a ghost that had never left. A turquoise dress, elegant, delicate, suspended behind glass in the front window of a sleepy dry cleaner's shop. Its fabric still shimmered faintly when the sun passed just right, like it remembered what it was made for. But beneath the shimmer, a darker truth clung to the hem. Faint stains, unmistakable, no matter how many times they tried to scrub them away. Most people passed the window without a glance. Maybe they saw a dress. Maybe they saw nothing at all. But to one woman, it was everything. To her, it wasn't just fabric and thread. It was memory, sealed in silk. It was the last thing her daughter wore before the world went quiet. She remembered the way the dress looked in their hallway mirror, the laughter, the camera flash, the rushed kiss on the forehead before prom night took her girl into the dark and never gave her back. Time passed. The flyers faded. Sympathy turned into silence. Even the detective stopped returning calls. But then, that window, that dress, still hanging there, still waiting for someone to notice what didn't belong. There's something unsettling about the way pain hides in plain sight. How the ordinary becomes haunted when you know where to look. This story isn't just about a missing girl or a mother who refused to stop searching. It's about the moment the past breathes again. When a mother sees a ghost not in a graveyard, but in a storefront window beneath fluorescent light. And once you see it, you can't look away. Because this time, the dress came back without her. And that was when everything began. The wind carried the smell of fresh-cut grass and something sweeter. Wild honeysuckle curling along the old brick walls of downtown Ridgemont. It was a beautiful spring morning. The kind that made people linger in coffee shops and greet each other with soft smiles. But for Rebecca Wilson, the world had gone permanently quiet. She moved along the sidewalk with a bag of flyers slung over her shoulder. Her fingers raw from folding corners and pressing tape against weathered lampposts. Her eyes, once bright with warmth, now scanned each surface like a machine, methodical, numb. 1 month ago, her daughter Zoe had vanished. 1 month since the prom dress, the corsage, the whispered "have fun," sweetheart at the door. 1 month since Rebecca's world collapsed in the span of a single night. She pressed another flyer to a telephone pole, smoothing it out with the back of her hand. Zoe's senior portrait stared back at her blue eyes full of promise. Blonde hair pinned just right. A smile that felt like it had belonged to someone else. Missing? The word printed in red at the top felt like a scream no one wanted to hear anymore. Behind her, people went about their lives. Parents pushing strollers, teens laughing outside the soda shop, shopkeepers sweeping their doorsteps, and still no one looked up. Not really. Not at her, not at the flyer, not at the pain that walked beside her like a second shadow. Rebecca had knocked on every door in Ridgemont, called everyone in Zoe's phone, waited on hold with news stations, pleaded with reporters, stood in front of cameras that blurred her grief into 30-second sound bites. She'd done the same for Deshawn, to Zoe's prom date. But people didn't ask about him much. Not out loud. He was from that part of town. The whispers followed Rebecca like smoke in a house that used to be warm. She got mixed up with the wrong crowd. That boy probably took her. They're probably just off somewhere together. As if Zoe was just skipping school. As if Deshawn, an honor student with a scholarship to Cornell, was just another bad statistic waiting to happen. Rebecca knew better. She felt it. In her bones, in the pit of her stomach. Something terrible had happened. Something no one wanted to look at too closely. She turned the corner toward Main Street, where the sun hit the glass just right. Her hand paused mid-motion with the roll of tape. Across the street, in the display window of Sparkle Clean, something shimmered. Blue, no turquoise. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a dress. Not just any dress, that dress. It hung on a wire hanger, half twisting in the breeze from the shop's ceiling vent. There was no tag, no plastic covering, just silk draped delicately in the sunlight, like it was waiting for one last dance. Rebecca stepped off the curb slowly, unaware of the cars that rolled by. Her eyes didn't move from the window, not once. The closer she got, the clearer it became. The neckline, the gather at the waist, the custom hue Zoe had picked because it made her eyes look like water under moonlight. It was hers. It had to be. But what stopped Rebecca cold wasn't the shape or the color. It was the stains. Near the hem, faint but unmistakable, like a faded bruise someone had tried to cover, were dark blotches, sunk deep into the fabric. Almost gone. Almost. But not enough. Not if you were a mother who had scrubbed blood out of your own clothes before. Not if you'd folded that dress into a garment bag yourself and zipped it up like sealing a time capsule. Her fingers trembled as she reached toward the glass. Not touching it. Just hovering close enough to feel the cold radiate from inside. Something twisted in her stomach, a thread pulled tight across her chest. She remembered how Zoe had twirled in front of the mirror that night. Her cheeks flushed, her hair pinned back with little silver stars. "I feel like a movie star," she'd whispered. Rebecca had smiled, blinking back tears. "You look like one too." Now the dress was here, and Zoe wasn't. The movie had ended, but the costume had come back. Rebecca stepped back from the window, her mouth dry. She glanced at the shop's painted hours on the door. They were open. The bell above the door jingled softly as she pushed it open. The scent of detergent and old steam curling around her like fog. Inside, the world felt too normal. A cheerful man with graying hair behind the counter looked up with a pleasant smile. But Rebecca wasn't looking at him. Her eyes had already moved past to the turquoise dress still hanging there. And suddenly, the silence in her life felt different. It didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like the beginning of something else. Something wrong. What came next didn't feel real at first. The door clicked shut behind her with the soft jingle of a bell, its cheerful chime swallowed quickly by the heavy silence inside. Rebecca stood still, letting her eyes adjust to the dim lighting of Sparkle Clean. The smell of starch and bleach hit her immediately sterile, artificial, masking something older underneath. And there it was. The dress, now only a few feet away, hung in the back, near the press station, where garments waited to be finished, pressed, returned to lives that kept going. But that dress didn't belong to anyone anymore, not really. Behind the counter, Harold Donovan emerged from a side room. He was older than she remembered, hair more silver than gray, a soft paunch beneath his navy apron. His expression warmed into polite recognition. "Afternoon, Mrs. Wilson. How can I help you today?" Rebecca's voice came out low, flat. That dress, in the back. Where did it come from? Harold glanced behind him, then back to her, the smile on his face flickering for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Oh, that belongs to a customer. Just finishing up the pressing." Her eyes didn't leave him. "That dress looks exactly like the one my daughter wore to prom. Same cut, same color, same stains." Harold chuckled softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think you're mistaken. Happens a lot. Formal wear's all starting to look the same these days." Rebecca stepped closer to the counter. "Harold, I know what I'm talking about. That dress was custom made. That shade of turquoise doesn't exist off the rack. I ordered it with her. I paid for it." She pointed directly at the brownish-red marks at the hem. "And those are blood stains. Don't lie to me." His body stiffened, and this time, the smile didn't return. Instead, he moved around the counter, walked to the rack, and in one practiced motion, removed the dress. Like I said, he muttered, hanging it behind a curtain, "Out of view, customer privacy." Rebecca's voice rose, but only slightly. "Then tell me who brought it in." "I can't do that. It's against policy." His voice was firmer now, controlled, but with something curling beneath it, something thin and defensive. She took a slow breath. "Harold, I've been watching this shop for the past hour. No one picked that dress up. No one dropped it off. I saw it through the window." He avoided her gaze. "You must have missed them." "I didn't." Her voice cracked. "I haven't missed anything since Zoe went missing." Silence. A long one. And then, as if summoned by the force of that moment, Rebecca pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Detective Morrison." Detective Greg Morrison arrived 20 minutes later, his unmarked cruiser idling at the curb as he stepped out with slow, deliberate movements. He was a man molded by procedures, trained to speak in facts, not feelings. Inside Sparkle Clean. Morrison listened as Rebecca spoke. She repeated everything: the dress, the stains, the evasiveness. Harold stood nearby, arms folded, face tight. Morrison turned to him. mind if we take a look at the dress?" Harold didn't hesitate. Too much. Hesitation would raise a red flag. But he also didn't invite them into the back. Instead, he gestured vaguely. "It's been picked up." Rebecca's heart skipped. "That's not true. You took it down 10 minutes ago. I saw you." Harold looked at Morrison. "I have footage." The detective nodded. "Then I'll need to see it." They watched the footage in a cramped back office, grainy black and white. And there it was. A girl, similar build to Zoe, blurry, featureless, picking up the dress, accepting a garment bag. Rebecca leaned in. "That's not Zoe." Harold shrugged. "Never said it was." "Then who is she?" Morrison asked. "Regular customer," Harold said. "Didn't get her name. We don't always log it for small cleanings." Rebecca turned, furious. "You don't log formal gowns with blood on them." Harold's face didn't move. There were no blood stains. Rebecca exhaled sharply and stepped away. Her voice dropped. "You're hiding something." Morrison's expression was unreadable. "We'll look into it," he said, but there was something in his tone, gentle, but laced with distance, that Rebecca recognized too well. He didn't believe her. Not really. Not yet. That night, the town slept. But Rebecca didn't. She sat in her car across from the laundromat. Headlights off. Engine quiet. The neon sign of Sparkle Clean flickered overhead, humming faintly in the stillness. Every few minutes, she checked her phone. Nothing. The world was still turning. Stores closing. Lights dimming. The normal rhythm of a town that had decided her daughter was already part of the past. But grief is not a thing that obeys silence. Grief stays awake. Around 8:47 p.m., movement in the alley caught her eye. The side door of Sparkle Clean creaked open. A figure emerged. Harold Donovan, carrying something tucked beneath his coat. He looked both ways. And then a second figure appeared from the shadows. Tall, slender, wearing a wool coat. Familiar in a way that made Rebecca's breath catch. Principal Robert Whittaker. From Zoe's school. Rebecca's stomach twisted. The two men spoke in hushed voices. Harold handed Whittaker something, a manila envelope. Rebecca rolled her window down just enough to catch a fragment. "It's too hot now," Harold whispered. She recognized the dress. Whittaker glanced back toward the street. His voice was lower, sharper. "I know. It'll be done with soon." The envelope disappeared into a pocket. And with it, so did any illusion Rebecca had left that this was all just coincidence. Something was happening, and it had everything to do with her daughter. And what came next would change everything. The wind along Oakwood Drive had a different chill that night. Not the natural kind, the kind that tugged at your coat and whispered through trees, but the kind that slithered beneath your ribs when the world you thought you knew begins to rot at the edges. Rebecca drove with the lights off. She stayed 3 car lengths behind Whitaker's silver sedan, heart rattling against her chest like a drawer full of loose cutlery. No more detective. No more waiting. Just a mother with shaking hands and a steering wheel gripped so tight her knuckles looked bone. They left the town behind, past the neighborhoods, past the lights, into the woods. The road narrowed. Pine trees pressed close, their arms tangled above the gravel drive. Whitaker's taillights blinked once, then disappeared into the dark. Rebecca parked 100 yards up, killed the engine, stepped out, silent. The forest air was damp, the kind that settled into your clothes, clung to your eyelashes. She moved quietly through the underbrush, her footsteps swallowed by moss and pine needles, until a structure emerged between the branches. A lake house, small, quiet, unassuming. 1 story, shuttered windows, a modest dock stretching into the water like a forgotten thought. Inside, light pulsed faintly behind the curtains. Yellow, warm, deceptive. She crept to the back. A study window stood half covered in gauze curtains. Rebecca rose slowly, peered through the sliver, and her breath fogged the glass. Inside, covering nearly every wall, were photos. Taped, clipped, pinned in tight lines. All of them girls, teenagers from Ridgemont High. Some at pep rallies, some walking to cars, some seated in classrooms, unaware of the lens pointed at them. But in the center was Zoe. Photo after photo, at practice, at lunch, at prom, dozens of them larger, clearer, more intimate. A shrine. Rebecca pressed a hand to her mouth. The nausea came first, then the fury, then the rising tide of "I told you so," but there was no one to tell. She was about to step away when she heard it. A sound, faint, below her, muffled, like someone moving through thick blankets. Then, something closer to a voice she had only heard in memories and dreams. The basement window was hidden beneath overgrown shrubs, its edges rusted with time. Rebecca pushed back the branches, found the latch, and to her horror, it opened. The air inside was colder, wetter. She slid through the narrow opening, dropping hard onto a concrete floor. Dust, boxes, old tools, a single bulb humming above her head. The room was cluttered holiday decorations, plastic tubs, a broken rocking chair. But the sound came again. A thump, a voice, faint but real. Rebecca stepped carefully between stacked crates. At the far wall, a hallway led deeper into the cellar. 3 doors. The first opened to an empty bathroom, the second locked. She pressed her ear to it. Breathing. She found a key, half hidden behind a breaker box. Hands shaking, she slid it into the lock turned. The click echoed like a gunshot. She hesitated, then opened the door. The room was small. Cement walls, dim lamplight, a cot in the corner. And on it, curled into herself, was Zoe. Rebecca didn't breathe. Couldn't. Her daughter alive, pale, thinner, eyes sunken but wide and lucid. Zoe looked up, and for a moment, the space between them felt suspended in time. Mom. Rebecca collapsed to her knees beside the cot, gathering Zoe into her arms, touching her face like a blind woman, rediscovering light. "You're alive," she whispered, pressing her lips to her daughter's damp hair. "You're alive." Zoe sobbed into her chest, her voice broken, barely there. "I knew you'd come." The walls of the room faded. The dust, the cold, the time lost. All that remained was the sound of two hearts beating, pressed together, one shattered, one still surviving. But then, Zoe pulled back. "He's coming back," she whispered. "We have to go." Rebecca's blood froze. From upstairs, a door creaked open, and footsteps began to descend. The truth was no longer buried. It had just opened the door. The footsteps grew louder, measured, deliberate, each one sinking into the wood above them like the slow ticking of a clock counting down. Zoe clung to her mother's hand, her breath sharp and fast. Rebecca scanned the room for anything she could use: a weapon, a hiding spot, an exit. Her eyes landed on a desk lamp beside the cot. Heavy base, metal frame. She unplugged it with trembling fingers, wrapping her hand around its weight. "Stay behind me," she whispered to Zoe. The doorknob turned, slowly, as if the man behind it already knew what he'd find. And then he appeared, Principal Robert Whitaker, framed in the doorway, his face lit from beneath by the basement light. The smile was gone, replaced by something colder, stranger, eyes wide, voice even. "You shouldn't be here." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, locking it with a soft click that echoed down Rebecca's spine. "I warned Harold," he said almost to himself. "Told him the dress would be a problem." Rebecca held the lamp higher. "Stay away from my daughter." Whitaker's gaze flicked to Zoe, and something in him shifted. "She doesn't belong out there anymore," he said softly. "They don't see her. Not the way I do." Zoe whimpered, pressing closer to her mother. "Why?" Rebecca asked, her voice raw. "Why her?" He blinked slowly. "Because she's different. She saw me. She smiled. She made me feel seen." His hand moved to his coat pocket. Zoe's voice cracked. "He has the knife." Rebecca's grip tightened around the lamp. Whitaker drew it out small, silver, familiar. The same blade Zoe had described through tears. The same one that had ended Deshawn's life. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "You chose to protect her. from a future she never asked you to imagine. Whitaker laughed, quiet, hollow. Deshaun would have ruined her. He didn't deserve her. He tried to save me. Zoe cried out, her voice rising from the shadows. Mom, Deshaun, he died trying to save me. Whitaker's face twisted. He wouldn't let her go. I gave him a chance, but he kept getting in the way. His voice broke at the edges. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Rebecca stepped forward, slow and steady. But it did. And now, you're going to answer for it. Whitaker lunged. Rebecca swung the lamp. The base struck his forearm with a sickening crack. The knife clattered to the floor. Run, she screamed to Zoe. They bolted toward the hallway. But Whitaker was fast desperation, has a way of making monsters. He caught Rebecca by the coat, yanking her back. She hit the ground hard. Air rushed from her lungs. The lamp skidded out of reach. Zoe turned, screaming her mother's name. Whitaker raised his fist ready to strike. And then, a sound. Sirens. They rose like ghosts outside the house, wailing through the trees, cutting through the dark. Headlights splashed across the basement window. Then boots on floorboards, the thunder of fists pounding the front door. Police open up. Whitaker froze. His eyes darted to the stairs. Rebecca used the moment, grabbed a fallen hammer from a nearby shelf. She swung. He howled as it connected with his shoulder. The knife, forgotten, was kicked across the floor. From upstairs came the sound of wood splintering. Down here, Rebecca screamed. And then, Detective Morrison? Framed in the basement doorway, like a savior from some fevered dream. Gun drawn, flashlight glaring. Drop it, hands where I can see them. Whitaker stumbled backward, arms raised. Behind him, Zoe sobbed. Rebecca dropped the hammer, fell to her knees. Officers flooded the room, pinning Whitaker to the floor. His voice, panicked now, clawed at the silence. You don't understand. She needed me. She wanted to stay. Ask her. But Zoe had turned her face away. She didn't answer. Outside, the forest air was still. Rebecca wrapped her coat around Zoe's thin shoulders as Morrison led them to the waiting ambulance. Red and blue lights flickered across the trees like a warning, or maybe a promise. Zoe's body trembled in her mother's arms, but her voice was steady. Is it over? Rebecca swallowed hard. Yes, she whispered, it's over now. Morrison walked beside them, his face worn and quiet. You were right, he said to Rebecca, about everything. She didn't speak. Didn't need to, because in her arms, her daughter was breathing. And somewhere in the forest behind them, truth had finally been exhumed. But the buried weren't always dead. Some were just waiting to be found. The woods behind the lakehouse were quiet the morning they found him. Mist clung low to the earth, curling around the boots of officers and forensic teams like a veil unwilling to lift. A shallow grave. marked only by disturbed earth and pine needles pressed flat. Deshaun Johnson had been buried with haste, but not without care. The blanket they found him wrapped in was clean, folded once at the edge, a teacher's attempt to rewrite a crime as mercy. But the soil still remembered the truth. Detective Morrison stood off to the side, his hands buried in his coat pockets, watching in silence as the team worked. Rebecca and Zoe weren't there. He'd advised them not to be. Some sights should never replace the memory of a boy who laughed easily, ran track, dreamed of designing homes for people the world often forgot. That evening, Ridgemont changed. Not with a bang. Not with justice shouted from rooftops, but with silence. A silence that admitted what the town had long refused to say aloud. That they'd failed him, not just in death, but in life. The local paper, once blind to Deshaun's disappearance, ran his photo on the front page. Not Zoe's. Not a grainy yearbook image of a girl gone missing. But Deshaun, in his tux, smiling, looking straight at the camera like he knew his life meant something. The community center overflowed at his memorial. Teachers, friends, families who'd never spoken his name now whispered it with reverence. Some came with flowers, others with apologies folded into shaky embraces. At the front of the hall stood Zoe. She was thinner, paler, but standing tall in black slacks and a borrowed blouse, hair pulled back, shoulders square. She stepped to the podium, clutching a single sheet of paper that shook softly in her hands. Her voice, when it came, was fragile but certain. Deshaun Johnson was my friend. We weren't dating. I know some people assumed that. We went to prom as friends. That's all. To dance, to laugh, to celebrate our last year. He was kind, gentle, the smartest person I've ever met. When Principal Whitaker approached us in the parking lot that night, Deshaun knew something wasn't right. He stepped between us without hesitation. He died trying to protect me. Zoe paused, her eyes brimming, but not yet breaking. I hear people call him a hero now. And he was. But you don't get to call someone a hero after you refuse to see him. Deshaun mattered. Before this. Before the tragedy. Before you believed me. Her voice wavered just once. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that. She stepped back from the mic, folded her speech, and returned to her seat beside Rebecca. The room was silent, not out of shock, but because there was nothing more to say. Only truth. Buried for too long. Now standing at the front of the room in a girl's trembling voice, echoing through hearts that had once chosen to look away. Outside, the sky had begun to clear, and somewhere beyond the trees, spring pressed forward softly, relentlessly, just like love. The lake is quiet now. A ripple here, a breeze there. No sirens, no footsteps in the dark. Just the soft breath of spring, settling over two figures on a weathered bench. Rebecca's hand rests over Zoe's. No words pass between them. But the silence no longer feels like loss. It feels like beginning. Wounds don't close cleanly. And the past doesn't stay buried. Not really. It lingers in the shadows of locked rooms, in the whisper of a dress behind glass, in the voice of a girl who came back with pieces missing, but a truth worth telling. Some stories never end. They echo, and when they do, we listen. If this one stayed with you, let us know below. Like the video. Subscribe for the next piece of the truth when it surfaces. And tell us, how did it make you feel? We're still watching the window. Still waiting. Just like her.